Hello, and welcome back to the Check-in Chat podcast. Well, we've checked into the pit stop, and now we're having a chat all about the amazing race. And today we're still going through season 1. It's episode 2 today, Divide and Conquer. And the theme for this episode is definitely been cutting. There's a lot of cutting. There's cutting in alliances that people don't know about. There's cutting in line, and one team is cut from the race. So we have a lot to get through as teams head from the Songway village in Zambia all the way to the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France. So let's get straight into it. The leg starts with Rob and Brennan. They're leaving the pit stop at the Songway village first at 11:23 p.m. They first have to head to the Songway Museum. Now, it's 100 yards away from where they start, and there's no signs to it, and anybody outside of the village will not know where it is. So they decide to wait in their car for Frank and Margarita and Joe and Bill. They want to work with them. But they go back to the pit stop to solidify a final 3. I'm like, don't think you're allowed to go back to the pit stop. But this season 1, a lot happened that doesn't happen today. We then get Joe and Bill departing second at 11:37 p.m. So that was just 14 minutes after Rob and Brennan. They used to fast forward in the last episode. And then at 12:05 a.m. was Frank and Margarita. And so they're following Frank and Margarita in the car because Margarita had thought she saw a sign the previous day for the museum, even though we know that's not true. So they all drive out the village. We then see Lenny and Karen. They're next to the BART at 1:52 a.m. And Karen says that at the end of the day, they'll still be together. And they'll have lots of story to tell their children because when we win the money, he has to marry me. Oh, Karen. That's not happening. We then get Pat and Brenda. They're the fifth to depart at 3:35 a.m. And we can see sort of these staggerings of times here. And at the moment, all the teams so far have decided to drive out of the village. And so, because it's dark, they have been given drivers, but the drivers are not from the village, so they're not in help whatsoever, and everyone is just lost. So, Margarita decides to reread the clue, the first indentation of the read your clue, where it talks about how they got to know the village really well during the pit stop, and so they realise, it's back at the village and they wasted 2 hours. So they head back to the village and Lenny and Karen, they finally find a local who tells them where it is and they go back. And the lead teams find out that it is a detour and the choice is near or far. And near teams have to go to the Mosioa Tunya National Park, which is only 20 kilometers away, where they will photograph 3 hard-to-find animals from a choice of 5: a giraffe, an impala, a water buffalo, a zebra, and a rhino. They say hard to find, but for some of them, they just walked out in front of them, so I don't think it was that hard. And in-file teams have to go to the Chobe National Park in Botswana, which is 110 kilometers away, and photograph a single elephant. And for either detour, once they've done, they must make their way to the Mukuni village and exchange their photographs for their next clue. And everyone chooses near, and I'm not surprised. But Brenda and Pat, they're still lost. They don't want to ask or read the clue, so they decided they're going to go for the fast forward award, which is to take a white water rafting trip down the Zambezi River. Kim and Leslie had 6 to the part, at 5:33 a.m. And apparently, during the pit stop, Kim and Leslie, there was some shenanigans involved at the hotel where they were sending messages to other teams under their doors, trying to put them off. This was according to Brenda in her exit interview. Apparently, their message said, "You don't have what it takes." And apparently, that actually spurred them on even more, Pat and Brenda. And they find the museum as they're driving out the village. And we then see Paul and Amy, they're seventh to depart at 5:50 a.m. And they decide to drive straight out the village. And Amy says that they're holding it together, but it's hard. And Paul says he's at his top of his stress level. We then get Dave and Margareta here, and they're departing eighth. Now, apparently they got a penalty during the pit stop because they improperly performed the air detour during the last leg. My note is, how? They ziplined and then they swung. How could you improperly complete that? I don't know. This is at 6:24 a.m. as well. They depart, and so they asked some locals about the museum in the village, and it's about a 10-minute walk. So they decided to walk to the museum, and it's started to come light now. And then Kevin and Joe to depart at 7:09, and they decide to drive from the village. And as they do, they pass Dave and Margareta. And Margareta comments that they should have driven, because now we're going to have to go back to the car as well. And Nancy and Emily are last to depart from the Songway village at 7:26 a.m. And Nancy says that she's got the best and most important job in the world. She's a mother, which is a good job. But she has to say, I do laundry and clean the kitchen and maybe go out for lunch. A woman's job is not just to do the washing and the cleaning. I felt what I was getting here. That was saying, oh, the best job is to do the laundry and the cleaning. It's not. But I felt that was what was got here. We then have Amy, and so they're trying to find the museum. She's just riding outside the sunroof here. Didn't think it was safe. And then Paul and Amy, they start to return to the village, where they meet up with Dave and Margareta, Nancy and Emily. And Kevin and Jude are not that far behind as well. And they say that they will find where the clue is, they help each other. And Kevin and Drew, when they find it, they say they know where the Mukini village is from getting previous directions, but then Drew gets distracted by a little elephant decoration on the table by the clue, and so they're currently in last place. We think Joe and Bill then are talking about alliances here, because they're at the detour and they work together, they finished the detour, and so they're talking about the alliance here, and they say how they're the leaders of the alliance, and the others are just slowing them down, but they might keep Rob and Brennan because Frank is just too uncontrollable. We then see Pat and Bender white water rafting. It was nothing eventful, but they do gain the Fast Forward Award and very excited to find out they're going to France. We then go back to the detour, and for the trading teams, they're taking their photos and they're being very risky. They're getting out the cars. Emily and Amy, they're getting out the cars to get the picture. Nancy at one point gets out the car, but she has trouble working the camera. And a rhino at one point's in the middle of the road. And Paul thinks, it's getting ready to charge and tries to get Amy back in the car. But she doesn't. She just gets the picture anyway. And once they reach the Mukini village, we see the water spitting ritual, which we know will be a switchback in season 27. And they then don't get a clue. They just get a little statuette of the Eiffel Tower. And that's their next location. And so, on the way to the village, Kevin and Drew have caught up. I don't know, but they've caught up to Lenny and Cameron here. And they overtake them on the way to the village. And We then cross to Kim and Leslie once they're done. They're saying, who wants to go to Paris? I hate Paris. I don't know why they're just acting really bitter here. We then have Paul. He's asking Amy if she has the money. But Amy's a bit distracted and she didn't hear him. So he then decides to say again, but screams at the top of his lungs. I'm like, you did need to do that, and that just upsets him more. So then apparently they got charters back to Johannesburg, which we didn't see, because we then get straight into the airport drama here. Our first taste of them having to book tickets themselves, and we see them, a lot of them, on the phone trying to book tickets. And Pat and Brenda, they phone tickets for tickets and they were promised tickets, and then they don't get them. Brenda breaks down here, which is quite upsetting. And a lot of them say how they might have been able to take connecting flights. And Amy, she keeps slamming the phone down several times on lots of different people. And she says she's at war. And so the main airport drama comes between Amy and Kim and Leslie. So Amy, she walked up to the same counter that Kim and Leslie were, and Kim saying, "Oh, can we have 4 tickets, please?" And then Amy's there, and Kim saying, "Oh, she's not with us." And Amy gets quite angry at Kim for saying that, and not being able to find anything else to go to Paris, so she's quite upset. She does walk away from it, but she's quite upset, and like the airline people have to sort of step in and tell them to relax, even though this is not sort of a fight. I'm like, who was in the wrong here? It was Kim. She shouldn't have said, "Oh, they're not with us," because Amy then just got there. Like, Amy wasn't getting involved. So, like, Kim and Leslie were sort of in the run there. Like, I feel like they just like antagonizing people, because we see in their confessionals when they talk about it, they just smile when they talk about it. And it's not nice. We then get the first plane, which has the first 4 teams. So Joe and Bill, Rob and Brennan, Frank and Margarita, and Pat and Brenda. And Joe talks about how Rob and Brennan, they're now cut from the alliance, because apparently Rob and Brennan said they'd never been out of the US before. So there's no point keeping them around, because how they're going to help us. And they're saying, oh, we've lived in Paris for 2 years. And so there's no friends, and all you have to do is act friendly. We then get the first and second flights arriving here, with the second flight containing Kevin Drew and Lenny and Kevin. And Rob and Brennan realise straight away that Joe and Bill have run off without them, and they go off for the train. And, they're not surprised that they've gone, but they don't care enough about them to be angry. So they just, chill with it. We then see Pat and Brenda. They're heading to the pit stop, and they're checking in first place. And we get that lovely yellow, shiny, and small, amazing race mat. Did you see it? So small and cute. We then get the first official roadblock of the series, and they're asked to choose someone who has strong legs and keen eyes. And so in this roadblock, that one team member must take the stairs and go up to the second floor of the Eiffel Tower. They then must use a 10-franc coin to search, using the viewfinder, to find something monumental, and find a monumental flag on top of a famous landmark, which happens to be the Arc de Triomphe. And this is where the pit stop for the second race will be, so we'll have to admit and check in there. The last team to check in will be eliminated. And performing this roadblock is Bill, Rob, Frank, Kevin, Lenny, Paul, Dave, Kim, and Emily. And once they get to the top there, of course, Bill, he gets it quickly, and Frank and Rob decide to work together, and they get it not long after. We see Kevin going there, and he's struggling to find it. Well, first of all, he's struggling, of course. He's not the fittest, so he's struggling with the stairs. And then, with the help of a local, gives him a potential tip and stuff, nudges him to the answer. And so, as Frank and Rob get to the bottom, like, Frank's all in a, like, adrenaline rush, like, we need to go, go, go. And he's like, just hitting Margarita's back here. And Rob and Brennan have to tell Frank to just chill out. So Lenny's there, and he just can't find it. So he comes back down, and Karen just shouts at him for not finding the flag. And Karen has, throughout when he was up there, she was just shouting at him, and you can't hear you, love. So she was getting just frustrated for like no reason. And so she forces Lenny to go back up. And then with the help of a local says, oh, there's Notre Dame. And so he thinks the flag is there. And so they go back and they go to Notre Dame. So as this is happening, the third flight arrives. And this is where cab gate happens. So Paul and Amy are waiting line. The CSI is saying, oh, you queue here. So they wait for a cab to arrive. And so as they're getting in the cab, Kim and Leslie cut in. And Kim fully admits it was cutting and that they did cut in line. And Amy's like, we were in the cab. And Kim just jumped in the front seat and started bribing the cab driver. And she was trying to negotiate to take us and not them. So there's a bit of screaming match and some words which I will not repeat. And Kim says that she was screaming like she would scream at her boyfriend. Fiancé. Leslie saying, you've got to play the game. It's good sportsmanship or bad sportsmanship. But like, a girl, no. There's things in the race, but you're pissing everyone off. We then get Amy and Paul. They get into another cab. And Amy's just crying. Now, I think Paul was being really sensitive here. And Paul was saying that they should go home and just quit because he'd rather be there and safe than having to see her cry all day, every day. And Amy just screams, stop at him. And so I felt like he was actually just trying to be really comforting to her in this moment. And Amy just was not having it. It's not been her day. We then see that Amy and Paul, they beat Kim and Leslie to the roadblock. And when Paul gets up there, he can't see the flag and kicks the wall. And Kim and Leslie, they get to the Eiffel Tower, but they miss the flag at the bottom and then take the elevator up to the top floor. And they're lost for a while. We then see Joe and Bill, and they check in second. But the funniest thing here, I think it was Bill who slipped on the map when he got there. Slightly hilarious. Bob and Brennan coming third with Frank and Margarita very close behind in fourth. We then see Lenny and Karen at Notre Dame. They realise they're in the wrong place. And they get into an argument. More Karen. And that they're nowhere near where they're supposed to be, and they're running out of money if they keep doing this. And Karen makes them return to the Eiffel Tower. We then see Kevin and Drew, they check in fifth, and Kevin tries his hand a bit of French. At least he's taking in the culture. We then see Kim and Leslie. They finally find the clue, and Lenny returns up to the deck. Paul finally finds it and heads back down. And Emily, she's up there and she's just struggling. And Lenny comes over to assist. And so they sort of work together to find the answer. And not long after Kim, what is it? Jane get Dave and Margareta very chicken and sits. We didn't see much of Dave and Margareta in this episode, which is a shame because I like them. Paul and Amy 7th, and Nancy and Emily in 8th. And so Kim and Leslie, they get to triumph, but there's this whole thing with this cab driver is very disgruntled once in the pay. He's like, oh, I'm going to call the police. But then they sort of just walk off. And so they then struggle to cross the street and allows Lenny and Karen to check in at 9th. And Phil, the Grim Reaper, comes in and they're begging, please don't let them be last. But they are, and they get eliminated. And they say their goodbyes to Nancy and Emily and Lenny and Karen before they leave. They said the biggest mistake was not teaming up with others, but also just generally not being nice that other teams didn't want to work with you. Just saying. So that was the second leg of the race, and it's time now for I'll Do It My Way. And in this segment, I'll do it my way, and I'll choose how I do the race. So, first of all, with the Songway Village and the Songway Museum, you would pretty much expect it. It's Songway Museum. You would expect it to be somewhere very close by. And so I would have asked the locals first who were there, just like Dave and Margareta did. And so I don't know why so many of them just went out and drove out the village. I didn't get that. And then from the detour, I would have chosen near, even with the far one who choosing the elephant, it is quite far away. And even with you have to do 3 of the 5 selections in the near detour, it's within the nature reserve, so you're most likely still going to have a chance of seeing them anyway. We then go to the roadblock here, and I wouldn't have done the roadblock for the second week in a row. It's terrible. But I do have condition. I'm mostly blind, so I wouldn't be very good help. Though it's strange because my partner, I don't think doesn't like running, and so if my partner was my late fiance, he doesn't like running. So I would have been better done. Actually, I might have ended up doing a roadblock if it involves just climbing off stairs because I do like stairs, and the viewfinder would have been just very helpful there. But that is it for the leg of the race, which means it's time to eulogize our eliminated team, which is Kim and Leslie, and I'll be doing that right after this. Hey fellow race fans, I know you are the same as me and love talking about Amazing Race, and if you want to get something off your chest or want to ask any Amazing Race question, no matter what it is, you can send me it in the comments or send me an email at checkinchatpodcast@gmail.com and I might answer it in a future podcast. This is We Were Rooting for You. We were all rooting for you. This is the segment where I eulogise the eliminated team, and today it's Kim and Leslie. And as a team, at first, you think, oh, Red's teachers, they're nice and sweet. Okay, they say they're competitive, but everyone says they're competitive. But it turns out, especially in this episode, they're not that nice. And we learned, of course, after the race about these pranks and the way they treated Amy at the airport, and then cutting in line and just smiling about it the whole time, and then just the way that they're trying to make excuses for it. I just felt were just like, no. This was just them being petty for them. And they said their biggest regret was not teaming up. I do agree with that. They could have teamed up like Emily did with Lenny, but also just to have been nicer. You know, they can be competitive people, but like John Bill said, it's about being friendly as well. So, unfortunately for them, it didn't work out this time. If they would have survived, how long would they survived? I would have. I think they could have survived a few more legs because I think there's a few more teams that could have gone for them, but then they would have gone around about possibly like 5, like 6, 7-ish. They would have gone, and unfortunately for them, I don't think they would have won. I just think their lack of like spotting the obvious or having an inclination of where something was. Like they did, like they bypassed the flag after, even though they said, "Oh, a lady said it's up here." Like they need to sort of also rely on their own instincts. I think they also saw that Amy. I think they saw Amy at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower during the roadblock, and it was like, well, if Amy's there, could something be going on over there possibly? So it's just sort of thinking about that and self-awareness. But for that, they're gone second, and I'm happy about it. Watching it back, I'm happy they've gone because that's some just the unnecessary negativity out the way, and like the causing arguments, because we're going to get a lot more arguments from other teams coming up with the next few legs, let me tell you. But for that, we now end this episode of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back next week for leg 3 of the race as teams head from Paris down to the south of France. And so, if you want to leave me some feedback or question or anything about Amazing Race, you can leave it in the comments on the YouTube video, or you can send me an email if you listen to the audio version at checkinchatpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget, if you're on the audio podcast, do give me a 5-star rating, that would really help. And on YouTube, give me a like and subscribe, helps me know that you like the podcast. And thank you so much for watching and listening this week, and I'll see you all next week. Bye bye.